I was 9 the night the river forgot its manners and climbed over its banks like a rude guest who won't wipe his feet. The county fair was still going when the sirens began to sing. People ran. A dropped toy, a crying baby, a man shouting for his wife. I held tight to Mother's skirt until the fabric slipped through my hand like a fish. After that, I saw only knees, rain, and the backs of strangers. Someone lifted me into the bed of a truck with other children. We rattled up a hill toward the church. I never saw who set me down, only felt the rough wood under my palms and the way the rain cooled my cheeks. Inside the church gym, they gave us thin blankets and tin cups of cocoa. My name was written on a card and pinned to my dress. That little card felt like a door key. I kept touching it to make sure I still owned my name. When the lights went low, the gym sounded like a sea. Coughs, snores, whispers, shoes squeaking, a baby fussing, then sighing back to sleep. I waited for Mother to walk in and laugh and say, "There you are, bird. I told you not to wander." I waited until my eyes would not stay open. Even in sleep, I kept my hand on the pin as if the name might float away. Morning brought oatmeal in paper bowls and questions I could not answer. Yes, I knew our street, but not the highway that led to it. Yes, I knew the corner store, but not the numbers on the sign. The adults meant well. Their questions were nets. I was a small fish slipping through. By the third day, the water went down, but the list of missing names stayed up. A social worker with a soft coat and tired smile knelt until we had the same sky. "There's a couple," she said. "Good people. They can keep you for now." I nodded the way a small person nods when the world has turned too big. She drove us down the hill, past mud lines on houses and clothes strung along fences to dry. We turned into a gravel lane where a white house sat with a porch and 2 chairs. A wind chime made of spoons clicked lightly. The porch light was already on, even though it was still afternoon. It looked like a tiny sunrise planted on a wall. A woman opened the door with flour on her hands. "Come in, sugar," she said, as if she had been expecting me all along. A man stood to greet me with kind eyes and a quiet voice. The kitchen smelled like stew and soap. A brown dog slept under the table and thumped her tail once without getting up. The woman set a bowl in front of me and the steam fogged my eyes. I ate because eating is what you do when someone cares enough to feed you. After supper, she showed me a small room with a thin bed and a quilt made of many squares. I traced the seams with my fingertip. Every square was different, but the warmth they made was one thing. I thought of my life and hoped it could be like that. Pieces, but warm. Before she left me to sleep, the woman looked back from the doorway and said, "We keep the porch light on at night, in case anyone is finding their way." That sentence put a blanket over my heart. I slept without waking. That was the first miracle. Their names were Ruth and Daniel. She laughed easy. He spoke less, but when he did, his words fit. In the mornings, Ruth hummed and the kettle sighed, and Daniel talked to things that could not answer. The latch, the tractor, the dog, and somehow everything obeyed. He carried quiet around him the way some men carry tools. I learned their rhythm like a song you hear through a wall and slowly begin to know. Shoes by the door, hands washed before bread, please and thank you braided together. First chores, then something sweet. My chore was the hens. They scolded me for being late even when I was early. I learned how to hold my hand flat so their pecks felt like taps and not like bites. At school, I sat by a girl with 2 long braids. She traded me half her cookie for half my sandwich and said, "Deal," as if we had just closed on land. The teacher gave me a pencil with a star-shaped eraser. "New starts," she said. I did not chew that eraser. I kept it whole for a long time. It felt like a promise. At night, I watched the porch light through my small window. It shone steady, not bright, but sure, like the smile of someone who isn't loud about love but means every word. In bed, I held the blue ribbon Mother had tied in my hair the morning of the fair. I kept it under my pillow. I whispered, "I'm here," to a home I could not see anymore and to a home I was learning. I hoped both could hear. One Saturday, Daniel hung another wind chime, this one made of old keys. When the wind found it, the keys spoke in little clinks, like cousins passing secrets. "We're all old keys," he said and shrugged, trying to fit where we open something. I did not answer, but the sentence settled over me like a shawl. Ruth took out a basket of scraps after supper. "I'm making a quilt for the spare bed," she said. "Choose a square." I chose a blue like my ribbon. "That one's for Mother," I said. Ruth nodded. "We'll carry her with us." Then she taught me to stitch. My stitches were unsure. They wandered like a child in a grocery aisle. "It will hold," she said, and kissed my finger when the needle found me. Her kiss worked better than a bandage. I thought one day, I want to be the kind of woman whose kiss can heal a poke and whose voice can make a room feel safe. My first birthday in the White House came around the bend of the year quiet as a cat. Ruth put a single candle in a small cupcake and turned off the kitchen light. Daniel cupped his hand around the flame so it would not tremble. They did not sing loud. Ruth just hummed the tune, small and true. "What will you wish?" she asked. I looked at the flame. I could have wished for Mother to walk through the door. I could have wished for my brother, Tom, to sit down and scrape his chair back like he always did. But the wish felt too big for one little candle. I said, "Let both homes be safe." Ruth placed the cupcake on the window ledge and we watched the flame burn down. The kitchen was quiet except for the clock and the dog's little snores. When the candle went out, a soft curl of smoke rose and then was gone. We cut the cake into 3 equal parts. No one tried to make their slice larger. That, to me, was the shape of love. Later that evening, I sat on the porch with Daniel and counted crickets. He did not ask for my thoughts. He let them sit beside us like another person, welcome and silent. Stars came on one at a time like careful lights. The wind chime said its small words. "Do you think light knows how to travel?" I asked. Daniel scratched the dog's neck. "It finds its way," he said. "I decided if light could travel, maybe love could too. Maybe both could cross water and roofs and roads. Maybe both were better at finding people than people were at finding each other." It was a new idea. I held it carefully, the way you hold a match between your fingers before it is aflame. A month later, the social worker returned with forms in a folder. We sat at the kitchen table where so many meals had taught me the taste of comfort. The air felt thick, as if the room knew what papers can do. "We can keep searching," the woman said. "Or, if you wish, we can place you with this family formally." She spoke in gentle words, but I heard the weight under them. Ruth laid her warm hand on mine. "Whatever you choose," she said, "we stand with you." Daniel's voice was quiet. "You don't owe anyone a brave face. Tell us your truth." My truth then was small and enormous. I was tired of packing my heart every night as if I would move in my sleep. I was tired of counting corners to stay calm. I wanted my bones to sit down. I wanted my name to have a coat hook where it belonged. "I choose here," I said. When I said it, I felt both sadness and relief braided tight. Ruth's eyes filled. Daniel lifted the folder a little, like it weighed less now. We signed papers in town. The judge had kind eyebrows and a pen that clicked. He asked if I understood. I told him yes, and for once my yes was taller than me. On the way home, Ruth and I stopped at the thrift store. I chose a book with a missing cover and a brave girl inside. Daniel bought a small radio at the hardware store, pale green with a glowing dial. "For evenings," he said. That night, we sewed the blue square into the quilt. "We are not letting go," Ruth said. "We are sewing in." I slept under that quilt and woke to the smell of pancakes. I learned that papers can change a thing the world sees, and stitches can change a thing your heart feels. Both matter. Years are funny. Some walk past slow and sweaty. Some sprint. When I turned 12, school was easier, chores familiar, and I could braid my own hair without bumps. My blue ribbon lived in a jar on my dresser now, not because I forgot it, but because I wanted to see it every morning. The quilt covered the spare bed. I could point to the blue square with my eyes closed. One afternoon, the social worker came again. She stood on the porch, and I knew from how she held her envelope that something inside it could bruise or heal. "We found a name," she said. "Your brother Tom." I sat down before my knees made their own ideas. "Your mother is with him," she went on. "Some days she remembers sharply. Some days her memory is fog. They're asking if you would write or visit." I felt the floor tilt like a boat. All the old ache woke up and stood in line with a new fear. Would I hurt Ruth and Daniel if I reached back? Could a heart have two rooms and not be drafty? Ruth did not make me ask the questions out loud. "If meeting them brings you peace," she said, "we go." Daniel set his hand on the table like a promise. "We'll pack sandwiches," he added. That was his way of saying, "The big thing is settled. The small things we can handle." That night I wrote to Tom. My hand shook at first, then found a rhythm. I told him I was well. I told him my porch light story. I told him I still kept the blue ribbon. When the envelope was sealed, I held it to my chest because the distance between here and there felt like a hallway with no end. Weeks later, a reply arrived. Tom's writing was tall and unsure, but his words were steady. "Come," he said, "when you can. Mother has more bright days when she is waiting for good things." We circled a date on the calendar. Ruth made a list. Daniel checked the tires. I touched the blue square on the quilt and did not cry. There is a kind of tired that has tears left. There is a kind that doesn't. I had the second kind. We left before the sun. Ruth packed sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, hard-boiled eggs, and a jar of peaches. Daniel put a blanket and a thermos in the back seat. The car had its own morning sound, a cough and then a steady hum. I held the quilt on my lap like a map that remembered me. Fields gave way to woods and then to fields again. We passed a barn with a new roof and a house with a porch tilt like a tired smile. The road narrowed until the grass met in the middle like two old friends. We stopped for gas at a station where a cat slept on the counter, and the owner swore the cat was a working man. Daniel bought 3 root beers. We toasted to old roads and new mercies. Before noon, the tire hissed and sighed us to the shoulder. Daniel knelt in gravel and changed it without complaint. I kept watch for snakes that never came. Ruth hummed one of her kitchen songs. I remember thinking, if love had a smell, today it would be rubber and warm dust. Later, we turned onto a dirt lane where cottonwoods stood like kind guards. In the yard of a small house, wind lifted a line of shirts and a rooster decided to argue with the sky. A young man stood by the gate with his hand over his eyes. I knew him before he spoke. People change, but the way they stand remains. He tilted his head like Tom always had when listening for faraway trains. "M?" he called. My name jumped in my chest. We walked fast without running. He grabbed me and I grabbed him, and we forgot we had bones to hold together. When we let go, he looked from Ruth to Daniel. "Thank you," he said. Simple, and it filled the space. He shook Daniel's hand like a man and hugged Ruth like a son. "Mother's inside," he said. "She has a bright day." He tried to smile without crying and failed. He wiped his face with the back of his hand like a boy and opened the door. Mother sat near the window in a chair with arms worn smooth by many hands. The light touched her hair and made a silver crown. For a breath I was afraid. What if she did not know me? What if she did and the knowing hurt? Tom cleared his throat. "Ma?" he said gently. "Look who's come." She turned and her eyes found my face. They warmed the way a stove warms when the match finally catches. "Little bird," she breathed. She opened her arms and I went home without moving an inch. She smelled of soap and something sweet, maybe the candy she liked when I was small. She hummed our old tune, the one with no name. We swayed and the room lost its corners. After a while, her brow tightened. She studied me like a page she almost remembered. "You're Emily," she said, testing it. I nodded. "Emily," she repeated, and a slow smile rose. "You got taller. That was all. That was everything." We ate stew at a table that had listened to many stories. Tom's wife, Sarah, set out plates and moved softly, like someone who had learned how to make a house gentle. She asked Ruth about baking and Daniel about fences, and made them feel less like visitors and more like kin you had simply not seen in a while. Later, on the porch, cicadas tuned their fiddles. Mother sat between Ruth and me. She touched the sleeve of my dress and my hair and my cheek like she was checking if the world had finally returned what it borrowed. "We lit a lamp for you each year," she said. "Light knows how to travel." Ruth reached for my hand. "Us too," she answered. The porch lights in 2 towns had been talking without us, it seemed. Then Mother told me the sentence that undid years of my guilt. "I prayed," she said softly, eyes on the dust rising in the yard. "The night before the river rose, I asked God to send you a safe porch and a full plate if I could not." She did not cry when she said it. She just nodded as if to herself. "Looks like he did." Something in me eased then, like a knot loosened. Love can open a door no key could. I had worried in secret that the day we met would be a tug of war, invisible rope burning everyone's hands. It was nothing like that. It was 2 families building a bridge and stepping out to meet in the middle. After supper, we all went outside because the house was too full of heat and feelings. The sun fell behind the cottonwoods and the wind chime made of spoons chattered softly, telling the breeze our news. Mother took Ruth's hands and held them with both of hers. "You are her people," she said. "Simple as you please." Ruth shook her head and smiled through tears. "We're her other people," she said. Mother nodded. "Then that is settled," she answered. "2 homes, 1 girl. No tugging," she turned to Daniel. "Keep her porch light steady." He cleared his throat and said, "Yes, ma'am," like a man taking a vow. Tom put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed. "You can come any time," he said. "We won't count the days. We will count the joys." I breathed easier than I had in years. That night, Ruth and Sarah stood by the sink and swapped recipes, and Daniel and Tom talked weather like surgeons talk heartbeats. The dog from the neighbor's place came by and slept under my chair with a sigh like a tired uncle settling in. Mother dozed with her head back and woke with a start and said, "Emily?" And I said, "I'm here." And she smiled and slept again. In the morning, we took a picture on the porch. I stood between Ruth and Daniel with Mother's hands on my shoulders and Tom on the other side, long as a fence post. Sarah held the camera and told us to tilt so everyone's face had equal light. The picture comes out sometimes in my mind when I am washing dishes or watching rain. All those faces, all that light finding a way. We stayed a week. In that small house, I learned how much love can soften hard things. Mother had bright days and fog days. On bright days, she remembered the lullaby and the way I used to hum when I put away silverware. On fog days, she would ask for me though I was in the chair beside her. On those days, I held her hand and answered every question like it was new. I did not remind her. I rejoiced each time, a little mercy. Tom showed me the small garden and the cracks in the porch step that made a tune when you walked over them. Sarah taught me how to roll dough thin with a glass if a rolling pin was missing. We went to the little church on Sunday. The preacher spoke about the prodigal son, though no one had left anyone on purpose. After the service, Mother walked straight to Ruth and pressed her face against Ruth's cheek. "Please be her steward," she said. That word stayed with me. A steward is a keeper who does not own. Ruth nodded. "I will keep," she said. On the last afternoon, we had what they called a little supper, which is country for a feast you pretend is small. Neighbors brought corn pudding and pies. We sat at a long table in the yard, and the wind did not dare to blow too hard. People asked me where I lived, and I said, "Here and there," and no one looked confused. They nodded like this was not strange at all. When it was time to go, Mother put a St. Christopher medal in my hand. "For traveling," she said. I hung it on the chain with the little locket Ruth had given me last Christmas, the one with a scrap of the blue ribbon folded inside. Tom slipped a carved wooden heart into my pocket. "So you remember we have the same heartbeat," he told me. Sarah tied one of her hair ribbons around my wrist for luck. We laughed and cried, and then we laughed because we were crying. Joy and sadness like twins, one pulling the other along. We drove away as slowly as a person can drive without going backward. The road dwindled, and the house got small, and then the cottonwoods hit it. I watched in the side mirror as long as I could. Then I looked forward. Sometimes you must look forward so your feet know which way to point. On the way home, we did not play the radio. The quiet felt right. Ruth's hand lay on my knee as if the road might try to take me. Daniel drove with his shoulders easy, not hunched the way he did when a thing was wrong. "We'll come back," he said at a rest stop as if I had asked. "As often as it makes peace," That was Daniel's way. Not the softest words, but the truest. At the White House, the dog danced and the wind chime told us welcome. The porch light clicked on. I slept long and woke with the sun on my face and the sound of the kettle sighing. I went to school and turned in my homework and smiled at the girl with braids. I fed hens that still believed I was late. Life sat back down where it had been waiting, but something in me had changed. My heart had opened a second door and found the breeze was not a draft but fresh air. People think love is a pie, and if you cut it more ways, the slices get smaller. I learned love is a lamp. You can light more wicks from the same flame and the room only grows brighter. I began to write letters on Sunday afternoons, one to here and one to there. To Mother and Tom, I wrote about the dog and the school and the new fence post Daniel set true. To Ruth's sister in the next county, I wrote about Mother's bright days and the way Tom looked when he said my name. News traveled. Light traveled. We kept our promise to share without tugging. Years passed in a gentle hurry. I grew into my elbows and then into my feet. Ruth taught me the stitch for binding a quilt so the edge does not fray. Daniel taught me to check oil by smell as well as by stick. Mother had more fog days. Tom married and Sarah had a baby girl with a laugh like tiny bells. We took turns visiting, sometimes them here, sometimes us there. Standing on our porch, Tom would tilt his head and say, "Your wind chime has a different accent," and Daniel would nod like this made sense. I finished school and went to the teacher college in the next town because someone had to promise the small ones that letters would be their friends. I came home on weekends. On Sundays, when I had a dorm room and a rusty bicycle, I still called Ruth and Daniel home. On Fridays, when I packed to visit Mother and Tom, I called their place home too. People who have only ever had one door to lock sometimes do not understand. That's all right. We don't have to hand our maps to everyone. I met Joseph at a used book sale. He was holding one end of a box while I held the other, and afterward he brought me a cup of coffee and asked about my favorite chapter of anything. He had velvet eyes and a way of listening that made the rest of the room dim. He loved his mother, kept his word, and turned the radio down when anyone spoke. I married him in a dress Ruth and Sarah basted together and finished on the same porch where Mother had blessed Ruth. The wind chime sang and the dog, older now, slept through most of it. Daniel shook Joseph's hand and said, "We are not giving her away. We are expanding the table." Mother, on a bright day, hummed our nameless song all the way through without stopping. We had a daughter first. Ruth taught her how to plant beans in rows that would be straight even if you closed one eye. Mother taught her to braid tight and then loosen the braid so the hair could breathe. Daniel taught her to listen to fences. Tom taught her to whistle using acorns. When our boys came later, they learned different lessons with the same love. They sat at Mother's feet and clapped to her tune even on fog days. We were not perfect, but we were rooted. When Ruth fell ill and the kitchen went too quiet, I baked bread from her recipe and burned the first 2 loaves and then got it right. When Daniel slowed down and let the fence lean a little, Joseph borrowed Tom's hands and the 3 of them stood it straight. When Mother forgot names but not faces, we all learned to answer to any name she chose. Love, she called us sometimes. That one fit everyone, every day. Now my hair is as white as the sugar on the cookies Ruth used to dust. My hands are a map of creeks and roads and work. I sit on the same porch where we once sewed the blue square into the quilt. The wind chime has lost one spoon and gained another. The porch light still burns every evening. When the grandchildren ask why I turn it on even in summer, I tell them, because light knows how to travel. They climb into my lap and tug my sleeve and say, "Tell us the story again." I do not start with the flood anymore. I start with the porch light, a small lamp in a wide night. Two homes learning the same language. But Grandma, they say, which home did you choose? And I tell them the truth. I chose to have a wider heart. When I was 9, I thought a family was a house with a door you could lock. When I was 12, I learned a family is a bridge. When I grew up, I learned a family is a quilt stitched from many colors and cloths, each square honest about where it came from, all of them keeping you warm. Ruth and Daniel are gone now, but they did not really leave. Their lessons make noise in my kitchen. The bread rises if you are patient and knock on it to listen. The fence stands strong if you set the first post true. Mother is gone too, but I keep her humming in my pocket. Tom still tilts his head when he listens for faraway trains. Sarah writes letters in a slanted hand. We bring pies to each other's porches. The grandchildren have learned both roads by heart. Some nights, when the last dish is dry and the day has clicked closed, I stand by the window and look at the lamp. I think of all the lights that burned for me, the church gym's red exit sign, the Lee's porch, Mother's lamp in the small window, the glow of that cheap green radio on nights when the storms were loud and we wanted to hear other people's voices saying, "We are here." If love had a job title, it would be that, "We are here." If love had a tool, it would be a steady little bulb screwed in by a man who believes in keeping promises. People sometimes ask what the hardest part was. They expect me to say, losing mother, or waiting, or that talk at the kitchen table with the papers. Those were hard, yes. But the hardest part was the time in between, when I stood in a doorway and believed I had to choose which way to face, as if turning toward one porch meant turning my back on another. That was a lie, fear told me. Love is the only thing I know that can face both ways at once and not go cross-eyed. If a child ever hears this story and thinks they must decide which love to keep, I hope they remember this. Love is not a pie. It is a lamp. When you light another wick from the flame, the first one does not dim. The room only gets brighter. Tonight, when I switch the porch light on, I will see it reflected in the window before the dark gets its say. I will hear a wind chime make its thin, brave music. Somewhere, in another town, on a different porch, I know there is another lamp that answers mine. The distance between them is nothing to light. It is nothing to love. So if you pass our road after dusk, and you glance over and wonder why one old house keeps its light burning even when no one seems to be out, that is the reason. It is not a habit. It is a message. It says to anyone who needs to hear it, you have a place to warm your hands. You can have more than one home. You are not a puzzle piece that fits in one space only. You are a person, and people can grow rooms in their hearts. That is my true story. I lost my mother and found her again. I found a family and learned I had not lost the other. I became a girl stitched to a woman by a thread that did not break. I was loved twice over, which is not greed. It is grace. And if I could change one thing, I would change nothing, because every sorrow and every miracle taught me the same sweet line. Love does not divide. It multiplies. It turns on the lamp. It makes a small sound in the wind. It waits, steady, until you come home, whichever way you are walking, and when you do, know this: both doors will open. Both tables will scoot over to make room. Both quilts will lift, and someone will pat the cushion and say, "Sit, eat, tell us how the road treated you." You will eat and talk, and then you will sleep the old miracle sleep that comes when a heart stops choosing and starts trusting that it is big enough. Tomorrow I will make bread with a grandchild, and he will ask me why the dough rises, and I will say, because something small and alive inside it was given warmth and time. He will pat the dough the way I once patted hens, and we will wait, and the kitchen will smell like memory and hope. We will slice the loaf, and butter will melt into a shine on the surface, and we will call neighbors to share, because when a thing is good, you do not keep it to yourself. That is what I know. That is what I can give. A lamp, a loaf, a story. Take what you need. Pass on what you can. And if you ever feel torn in two, stand still a moment and listen. Somewhere, a wind chime is talking in a language you already understand. Somewhere, a porch light is telling the dark, "Not today." And somewhere, two homes are waiting with the same open hands, ready to catch you no matter which direction you come running from. Love multiplies. It always has. It always will.